I used to believe blood was a binding contract, signed at birth and honored till death. But the night my own son looked through me like a stranger, that belief shattered clean through my bones. I'm telling you this now, because silence almost swallowed me whole. And because sometimes the deepest wounds come wrapped in the faces we trust most. My name is Lorraine Matthews, and I'm 68 years old. I've lived my whole life in a tidy brick house on the south side of Atlanta. The same house my late husband and I bought back when hope was cheap and knees didn't ache when rain came. This house raised my son, Marcus. It held birthday candles, scraped knees, report cards stuck to the fridge with gospel choir magnets. It was supposed to hold my golden years, too. I was raised to believe family was sacred. My mama used to say, "Baby, the world might turn its back on you, but your blood never will." I carried that lesson like scripture. I poured it into Marcus with every pot of collard greens, every late-night prayer when he stayed out too long, every sacrifice I didn't announce out loud. So when Marcus married Vanessa, I welcomed her with open arms and an open heart. Lord knows I tried. I hugged her tight at the wedding, whispered, "Welcome to the family, baby," and meant every word. She smiled polite but thin, like someone tasting something unfamiliar and deciding they didn't care for the flavor. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, the way her eyes skimmed over me instead of settling, the way her "thank you" sounded rehearsed, not warm. I said, "Lorraine, don't be sensitive." I said, "Times are different now." I said a lot of things to protect a peace that was already cracking. Marcus used to call me every Sunday. After Vanessa, Sundays went quiet. I'd stare at my phone like it owed me something, my thumb hovering, pride battling longing. When I did call, conversations felt rushed, like I'd interrupted something important, something I was no longer part of. One afternoon, I decided to drive over unannounced. That was my first mistake. I carried a peach cobbler, still warm, the way Marcus loved it growing up. When he opened the door, surprise flashed across his face. Not joy. Vanessa appeared behind him, arms folded, lips pressed tight. "Oh," she said, "we weren't expecting company." I laughed it off, stepped inside anyway. The air felt cold despite the summer heat. Their house didn't smell lived in, didn't smell like love. It smelled staged. Marcus barely met my eyes. Vanessa hovered, correcting small things I said, reminding Marcus they had plans. I sat on the edge of the couch, suddenly aware of how old my hands looked folded in my lap. That night, driving home alone, the streets blurred through tears I didn't give permission to fall. A question kept knocking at my chest. When did my place in my son's life become optional? I didn't know then that this was only the beginning, that the real betrayal hadn't even shown its face yet. All I knew was that something sacred was slipping through my fingers, and no amount of love seemed enough to hold it. Loneliness doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in quietly, like a draft through a cracked window you didn't notice was broken until you're already shivering. After that visit to Marcus's house, the silence between us grew teeth. And every unanswered call felt like a small rejection dressed up as busy schedules. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking things. Lord knows I'd lived long enough to understand seasons change, children grow, marriages shift priorities. Still, there was a heaviness pressing on my chest that no amount of rational thinking could lift. The house felt too big, too quiet. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway sounded accusatory, counting out time I was no longer included in. Weeks passed without a word from Marcus. Not a call, not a text. I finally broke and dialed his number one Tuesday evening, pacing the kitchen while my greens simmered on the stove. He answered on the fourth ring. "Hey, Mom," he said, voice distracted. "Hey, baby," I replied softly. "I was just checking on you. Haven't heard from you in a while." There was a pause. Then, "Yeah, things have been busy." Busy. That word again, always busy when it came to me. I asked about work, about his health, and about Vanessa. He answered politely but briefly, like someone ticking boxes. When I mentioned Sunday dinner, how I miss cooking for him, the line went quiet. "Well, Mom," he sighed, "Vanessa thinks it's time we set some boundaries." Boundaries. That word hit harder than I expected. "Boundaries?" I repeated. "Baby, what boundaries? I don't come by unless invited now. I don't call every day. I've tried to respect your space." "Well," he said slowly, "Vanessa feels like you're too involved." I felt my throat tighten. Too involved in my own son's life? "She just thinks," he continued, voice flattening, "that we need to focus on our marriage, and that sometimes your expectations make things uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. As if love itself had become an inconvenience. I wanted to ask him when caring turned into control, when showing up became overstepping, but I swallowed those questions. Because mothers like me were raised to bend, not break. "I understand," I said instead, though my heart screamed otherwise. After we hung up, I stood there staring at the wall, the smell of overcooked greens filling the air. I hadn't realized I was crying until tears dropped onto the floor, darkening the tile like ink blots of grief. That night, I lay in bed replaying moments from Marcus's childhood, the nights I stayed up sewing costumes, the overtime shifts I worked so he could attend college, the prayers I whispered over him when his father passed, promising God I'd protect that boy with my life. Now here I was, being told my love was too much. Vanessa's presence hovered in my thoughts like a shadow. She never raised her voice, never outright insulted me, but she had a way of tightening spaces, shrinking rooms, making it clear without saying it that I didn't belong where I once stood front and center. And Marcus, my Marcus, was letting it happen. The next Sunday, I set the table for one. Habit made me pull out 2 plates before I stopped myself. I laughed then, one sharp, lonely laugh, and put the extra plate back. I ate in silence, the clink of silverware echoing like judgment. I told myself this was temporary, that my son would remember who held his hand when the world felt too big, that blood still meant something. But deep down, a quieter voice whispered a warning I wasn't ready to hear yet. Asterisk. Sometimes the people you raise don't grow toward you. They grow away. The day I realized I had officially been written out of my son's life didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came wrapped in a folded piece of paper and a quiet knock from the mailman. I stood there in my slippers, holding an envelope that didn't feel dangerous until I opened it. And when I did, my hands began to tremble like they already knew what my heart was about to learn. It was a notice from the bank. Not a bill, something worse. A refinancing statement tied to my house. Asterisk my asterisk house. The one with the creaky 3rd step and the rosebush Marcus planted for me when he was 12. I read it twice, then a 3rd time, my eyes struggling to make sense of words that felt foreign in my own living room. Marcus's name was listed, along with Vanessa's. I sank into the nearest chair, the paper crumpling in my grip. My chest tightened so fast I thought I might faint. I hadn't signed anything, hadn't agreed to anything. Yet there it was. Legal language explaining that changes were being processed regarding ownership and responsibility. I called Marcus immediately. No answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. Hours passed. I didn't eat, didn't turn on the television. I just sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing, trying not to panic. By the time Marcus finally returned my call that evening, my voice felt hollow, like it had already used up all its strength. "Marcus," I said, skipping pleasantries, "why did I receive bank papers with your name on my house?" There was a long pause. Too long. "Mom," he finally said, "I was meaning to talk to you about that." Meaning to. Lord. "Talk to me about asterisk what asterisk?" I asked, gripping the phone so tight my fingers ached. He cleared his throat. "Vanessa and I thought it would be smart to help manage things. You're getting older, Mom. We just want to make sure everything's secure." "Secure for who?" I asked quietly. "For you. he replied quickly. Too quickly. For us, for the family. Family. That word again, twisted into something I barely recognized. I didn't agree to this, I said. You didn't even ask me. Well, he said, voice firming, we assumed you'd want what's best. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I saw Marcus at 7 years old, asleep on my shoulder during a thunderstorm, trusting me completely. That boy would never have made assumptions about my life without asking. And Vanessa? I asked softly. Whose idea was this? Another pause. Then, she just thinks we need to plan ahead. You know how things can get complicated. Complicated. Like my existence had become paperwork. I felt something crack open inside me then. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet break that hurt worse than anger. Marcus, I said, my voice trembling, this house is the only thing I have left of your father, of the life I built. I know, he said, but there was no warmth in it, and that's why we're involved now. After we hung up, I sat in the dark long after the sun disappeared. The walls felt like they were closing in, no longer protective but threatening. I realized then that this wasn't about helping me. It was about control. About erasing my authority in my own life, one polite decision at a time. And the hardest truth of all settled heavy on my spirit. My son hadn't just drifted away. He had chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to memories echo off walls that suddenly felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. Every creak of the house sounded like a warning, and every shadow felt like proof that something precious was being quietly taken while I was still alive to witness it. By morning, I had made up my mind. If decisions were being made about my asterisk life and my asterisk home, then I deserved the decency of a face-to-face conversation. No more phone calls, no more polite deflections. I needed to look my son in the eye and hear him explain how love had turned into paperwork behind my back. I dressed carefully that day, choosing my navy blue church suit, the one Harold used to say made me look put together no matter what. I pressed my pearls against my neck like armor and whispered a prayer before stepping out the door. Not for confrontation, but for clarity. Marcus and Vanessa's house looked the same as always, but it felt different when I stood on the porch. Smaller somehow, less welcoming. I rang the bell and waited, my heart pounding so loud I wondered if they could hear it inside. Vanessa opened the door. "Oh," she said again. That same word, that same tight smile. "Lorraine." "Vanessa," I replied evenly. "I need to speak with my son." She hesitated, then stepped aside. Marcus stood in the living room, arms crossed, already defensive. No hug, no smile, just distance. "We need to talk," I said, taking a seat without waiting to be invited. "About the bank papers, about the house." Vanessa sat down across from me, folding her legs, her posture precise. Marcus hovered, unsure where to place himself, like a child caught between parents. "We're just trying to help," Vanessa began, her voice calm but cool. "At your age, it's important to have plans in place." "At my age?" I repeated softly, staring directly at her. "I'm still very much alive." "Of course," she said quickly, "but things happen, and Marcus worries about you being alone." I turned to my son. "Since when?" He shifted. "Mom, you know I care, but Vanessa's right. We need to think ahead." I took a deep breath. Thinking ahead doesn't mean making decisions asterisk for asterisk me without my consent. Vanessa's eyes hardened just a bit. "With respect, Lorraine, sometimes parents don't realize when it's time to step back and let their children lead." That was it. That was the line she crossed. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "This house is not a baton to be passed. It's my home, and Marcus may be your husband, but he is still my son." Marcus finally spoke up, his tone sharp. "Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be." Harder. I looked at him then. Really looked, and barely recognized the man standing in front of me. The softness was gone, replaced with impatience, with allegiance. I raised you to honor your elders, I said quietly, not sideline them. Vanessa stood. I think this conversation is getting emotional. Maybe we should revisit it later. No. Later was how everything had been taken inch by inch. I won't be revisiting anything, I replied, standing myself. I will be contacting my lawyer and the bank and anyone else I need to protect what's mine. Marcus's face flushed. You don't have to go that far. Yes, I said, my voice breaking just a little. I do, because clearly no one else is looking out for me. I walked out without another word, my legs shaking but my spine straight. And as I drove away, one painful truth settled deep in my soul. Sometimes, the loneliest place in the world is standing between your child and the person they chose over you. I thought walking away from that house would bring relief, but instead it opened a hollow space inside me that echoed with everything I hadn't said, and everything my son hadn't defended. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit in the car and breathe. Because nothing prepares a mother for the moment she realizes her child no longer feels like her safe place. The house greeted me with silence. No radio playing softly, no neighbor's laughter drifting through the window, just stillness. I kicked off my shoes and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same spot where Marcus used to do his homework while I cooked dinner. I could almost hear his little voice asking, "Mama, can you check this?" Lord, how did we get from that asterisk to this? I called my sister Evelyn that evening. If there was one person who knew my heart without explanation, it was her. "Lori," she said as soon as she heard my voice, "what's wrong?" And just like that, the dam broke. I told her everything, the bank papers, the confrontation, Vanessa's words, Marcus's silence where loyalty should have been. Evelyn listened without interrupting, the way strong women do when they know you need to empty yourself out before you can stand again. When I finished, she sighed heavy. "Baby, I've been worried about this for a while." That stopped me. Worried about what? "About how that girl's been easing you out," she said gently, "and about Marcus letting her." I swallowed. "I raised him better than this." "I know you did," she replied, "but grown children make choices, and sometimes those choices hurt the very people who taught them how to stand." After we hung up, I sat alone with that truth. No excuses left, no pretending this was just a misunderstanding. My son had chosen comfort over conscience, peace at home over respect for his mother. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. I contacted a lawyer, something I never imagined doing against my own child. Each signature felt like a small funeral for the relationship I thought we had. Still, I reminded myself, protecting yourself is not betrayal. It is survival. Marcus didn't call, not once. That hurt more than anything else. Not the argument, not Vanessa's cold smile, but the silence. The way he let days stretch into weeks without checking on me, as if I'd already been filed away under asterisk-handled asterisk. One afternoon, I found an old photo while sorting through drawers. Marcus, at 5 years old, missing front teeth, arms wrapped around my neck. On the back, in my handwriting, it said, "Asterisk my whole heart." I pressed that photo to my chest and cried the kind of cry that comes from deep places shaped by years of loving without condition. I wasn't crying because he'd hurt me. I was crying because I finally understood. Loving someone doesn't guarantee they'll love you back the same way forever. That night, as I knelt by my bed, I prayed not for reconciliation, but for strength. Strength to accept what was. Strength to stop chasing someone who no longer reached for me. Strength to redefine family on my own terms. Because blood may connect us, but character reveals us. And if my own son could stand by while I was slowly erased, then I had to learn how to stand alone. Not bitter, not broken, but awake. I didn't realize how invisible I had become until the world kept moving without asking where I fit in it anymore. Days passed where my name wasn't spoken out loud by anyone but me. And in that quiet, I learned how loud abandonment can be. The lawyer's office smelled like stale coffee and caution. I sat across from a man half my age explaining trusts, deeds, and protections like he was reading weather reports. I nodded, asked the right questions, signed where necessary, but inside I was grieving something no legal document could restore. Each signature felt like admitting defeat in a war I never wanted to fight. Family disputes are the hardest, the lawyer said gently, sliding papers into a folder. They usually don't start out this way. I smiled politely. He had no idea. When I got home, there was a voicemail waiting. Marcus. My heart jumped before my pride could stop it. Mom, his voice said, clipped and controlled. Vanessa told me you contacted a lawyer. I don't think that was necessary. Necessary. That word followed me like a curse. I sat down slowly, the message still playing in my mind. No concern for how I was feeling, no apology, just irritation, like I'd inconvenienced him by protecting myself. I didn't call him back. That was new for me. Silence had always been my enemy, something I rushed to fill with explanations and forgiveness. But that day, silence felt like the only language left that still respected me. Church became my refuge again, not the front pew where everyone could see my pain, but the back row where I could sit with it quietly. The ladies hugged me, told me I looked tired, said they hadn't seen Marcus in a while. I smiled and said he was busy. Old habits die hard. One Sunday, Reverend Collins preached about Ruth and Naomi, about loyalty, about choosing love when it's inconvenient. I felt the tears coming before I could stop them. Not because Marcus had failed me, but because I had finally stopped making excuses for him. After service, Mrs. Jenkins squeezed my hand. You okay, Lorraine? I will be, I said. And for the first time, I believed it. At home, I began reclaiming small pieces of myself. I repainted the guest room, the one Marcus and Vanessa used to stay in, softy yellow. I planted new flowers in the yard, my knees aching but my spirit lighter with every scoop of dirt. I joined a book club at the community center, sat with women who laughed loudly, lived honestly, and didn't make me feel like I had to earn my place. Still, nights were hard. I'd reach for my phone out of habit, thumb hovering over Marcus's name, wondering if tonight would be the night he'd call and say, "Asterisk, Mama, I messed up." Wondering if Vanessa ever felt the weight of what she'd helped fracture. Wondering if my son missed me at all. One evening, an envelope arrived. Marcus's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet. No greeting, no love, just words explaining they were stepping back until things settled, as if relationships were dust storms you could wait out behind closed doors. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer with other things I no longer needed to look at every day. That night, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom and whispered to the quiet. I did the best I could. And for the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't argue back. The call came on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind of rain that blurs the windows and makes the world feel smaller than it really is. I almost didn't answer, because grief teaches you to brace before you pick up the phone. But when I saw Marcus's name, my heart betrayed me before my mind could intervene. "Mom," he said. And for a split second, I heard the boy I raised instead of the man who'd hurt me. "Yes, Marcus," I replied, careful, measured. "We need to talk," he said, "in person." I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect the fragile peace I'd begun to build. Another part, the mother part that never truly shuts down, whispered that this might be the moment things turned around. "When?" I asked. "Tonight," he said, "if that's okay." I agreed, then spent the rest of the afternoon pacing, wondering which version of my son would show up at my door. He arrived just after 6, rain dripping from his jacket, eyes tired. No Vanessa. That alone told me something was wrong. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd once colored pictures and asked for snacks. Time felt heavy between us. "She's upset," he began, "about the lawyer, about everything. I waited. She feels like you don't trust us, he continued, like you're pushing us away. I laughed then. Not bitter, not loud, just tired. Marcus, I said softly, I didn't push anyone away. I was pushed. He rubbed his face. You don't understand how much pressure I'm under. And you don't understand how alone I've been, I replied. But I'm listening. That surprised him. I could see it in his eyes. He told me about arguments at home, about Vanessa feeling threatened, saying I made her feel like an outsider in her own marriage, about how every time my name came up, tension followed. I didn't know how to fix it, he admitted. So I tried to keep the peace. At my expense, I said gently. He looked down. I didn't mean for it to be that way. But it was, I replied, and it still is. Silence stretched between us. Outside, thunder rolled like punctuation. I need you to understand something, I continued, my voice steady. Being your mother doesn't mean I want control. It means I want respect. And being your wife doesn't give Vanessa the right to erase me. He nodded slowly, tears pooling. She says I have to choose. That broke me. Baby, I whispered, reaching across the table, if someone asks you to choose between honoring your mother and pleasing your spouse, something is already wrong. He pulled his hand back, conflicted. I love her. I know, I said. But love isn't supposed to demand loyalty at the cost of decency. He stood suddenly, pacing. I don't know what to do. I stood too, my knees stiff but my spirit firm. Then you need to learn, because I can't keep shrinking so your marriage feels comfortable. We hugged when he left. It felt familiar and foreign all at once. As he drove away, I knew this conversation wasn't a resolution. It was a fork in the road. That night, I lay awake, realizing something important. Reconciliation requires two people willing to tell the truth, and my son was still afraid of his. I whispered another prayer, not for him to choose me, but for him to choose integrity. Because love that demands silence isn't love at all. I woke up the morning after Marcus left with a strange heaviness in my chest. Not despair, not hope, but something in between. It was the weight of knowing truth had finally been spoken, even if it hadn't yet been accepted. And sometimes, that's the loneliest place to stand. Days passed after our conversation, quiet but charged. I didn't hear from Marcus again, and oddly enough, I didn't chase him. Something in me had shifted. I had said my piece without raising my voice or losing my dignity. Whatever happened next would reveal who he was ready to be. Then the rumor reached me through church, because church, bless it, always knows before you do. Mrs. Carter leaned in close after Bible study and whispered, I didn't want to say anything, but I saw Marcus and his wife looking at houses out in Marietta. I felt my stomach drop, though my face remained calm. Did you now? Yes, ma'am. Big place. Real nice. I thanked her and walked to my car, the world tilting just slightly. So that was it. Plans were being made again, big ones, without me in the room. I sat behind the steering wheel and let the truth wash over me. Marcus wasn't confused. He was moving forward, and he was doing it without looking back. That evening, I received a text, not from Marcus, but from Vanessa. We need to talk, woman to woman. I stared at the screen for a long time. My instinct was to ignore it, but another voice inside me, older, wiser, said this was a conversation overdue. Tomorrow afternoon, I replied. She arrived right on time, dressed perfectly, posture stiff. She didn't sit until I gestured. There was no small talk. I'll be direct, she began. I feel like you don't respect our marriage. I folded my hands. And I feel like you don't respect my place in my son's life. She inhaled sharply. Marcus needs to be fully present in our relationship. Every time you're upset, it pulls him away. Then maybe the problem isn't my feelings, I said calmly, but his inability to balance love. Her eyes narrowed. You make everything about you. I smiled sadly. No, Vanessa, I finally stopped making everything about him. She leaned forward. We're starting a family soon. We need stability. "And you think pushing me out provides that?" I asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. That honesty stung more than cruelty ever could. I stood. "Then let me be honest, too. You may be his wife, but I am his foundation, and foundations don't disappear just because someone finds them inconvenient." She rose, flustered. "You're going to lose him if you keep this up." I met her gaze. "I already lost him. The question is whether he'll ever find his way back." When she left, I didn't cry. I sat quietly, absorbing the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a strategy, and my son was participating, whether he admitted it or not. That night, I wrote Marcus a letter. Not angry, not pleading, just honest. I told him I loved him, that my door was open, but that I would no longer accept disrespect disguised as peacekeeping. I mailed it the next morning, knowing I might never get a response. But for the first time, my heart felt steady, because I finally understood. Sometimes, love means letting go, not to punish, but to preserve yourself. The silence after you finally speak your truth is louder than any argument you've ever survived. It presses against your chest at night, daring you to doubt yourself. And for a while I did. Weeks passed after I mailed that letter to Marcus. No reply, no call, nothing. The mailbox became my daily ritual of disappointment. I'd open it with a breath of hope I pretended not to have, then close it slowly, reminding myself I had already said everything that needed saying. Life, however, has a way of continuing whether your heart is ready or not. I slipped into a new routine. Early morning walks around the block, waving at neighbors I'd lived beside for years, but never really seen asterisk. I started cooking smaller meals, learning how to season food for one without it tasting like loneliness. Some evenings were easier than others. Some nights, I still caught myself setting 2 cups on the counter before correcting course. Then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart jumped anyway. When I opened the door, it wasn't Marcus. It was a woman in a gray suit holding a clipboard. "Miss Lorraine Matthews?" she asked. "Yes." "I'm here regarding a property assessment." My chest tightened. "Who sent you?" She glanced down. Request came through under Marcus Matthews. I closed my eyes. Just for a second. Long enough to steady myself. "I didn't approve any assessment," I said firmly. She nodded. "I understand, I just needed to inform you." After she left, I sat on the edge of the couch, my resolve tested again. Even after my letter, even after my boundaries, they were still making moves around me instead of asterisk with asterisk me. That evening, my phone rang. Marcus. I answered without speaking. "Mom," he said quietly. No greeting, no warmth, just heaviness. "I got your letter." I waited. "I didn't realize how serious things had gotten for you," he continued. "Vanessa's been pushing me to think about the future, about assets, about security." "And where do I fit into that future?" I asked. He hesitated. "I thought you'd always be okay." That hurt more than anything else he could have said. "Being strong doesn't mean being disposable," I replied. "I know," he whispered. I feel like I'm failing everyone." I softened, but I didn't bend. "You're failing yourself when you avoid doing what's right." Silence filled this space between us. "She's pregnant," he finally said. The words landed heavy, complicated. Joy mixed with grief, love tangled with loss. "I see," I said slowly. "She wants to move forward without conflict," he added. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "A baby doesn't erase accountability, Marcus." "I know," he said again, but it sounded weaker this time. We talked a little longer, nothing resolved, nothing promised. When the call ended, I sat in the dark and placed a hand over my heart. I was going to be a grandmother. And yet, I had never felt farther from my own blood. That night, I made a decision. Not out of anger, but clarity. I updated my will, changed beneficiaries, made arrangements that reflected the reality of my life, not the fantasy I'd been clinging to. It wasn't punishment. It was honesty. If my son wanted distance, then I would stop stretching myself thin trying to bridge it alone. Love cannot survive on one-sided sacrifice forever. As I turned off the lights, I whispered into the quiet, "I choose peace, even if it costs me the story I thought I'd live." And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was a reckoning. I thought knowing I was going to be a grandmother would soften the ache, but instead it sharpened it, carving new questions into places that were already sore. Joy and grief sat side by side in my chest, neither willing to leave. And every time I imagined that baby, I wondered if love would reach them easier than it reached me. Marcus didn't tell me anything else after that call. No updates, no check-ins, just silence again, thick and deliberate. I heard about the pregnancy through others, church friends, distant cousins, whispers that always seemed to find me whether I wanted them to or not. "Vanessa's glowing," someone said kindly, not knowing each word landed like salt. I smiled, I always smiled. But at home, behind closed doors, I let myself feel it. The loss, the fear, the quiet rage that my son was building a future that apparently didn't include my presence unless it was convenient. I tried to imagine being a grandmother from a distance. No first ultrasound photo, no baby shower invite, no hand on Vanessa's back whispering encouragement the way older women once did for me. One afternoon, I gathered old baby things from the attic. Marcus's tiny booties, a faded blue blanket. I held them, memories washing over me in waves so strong I had to sit down. I wondered if that child would ever know how deeply they were loved by a grandmother they hadn't even met yet. That evening, there was another knock at my door. This time, it was Marcus. He looked thinner, tired. His eyes carried the weight of a man pulled in too many directions. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He sat at the table, head in his hands. "Vanessa doesn't want you involved," he said quietly. "She thinks stress is bad for the baby." I took a slow breath. "And what do you think?" He didn't answer right away. "I think I've already messed this up." "Yes," I said gently. "You have." He looked up, eyes wet. "I don't know how to fix it without breaking something." "That's adulthood," I replied. "Sometimes you have to break the wrong thing to save the right one." He swallowed. "She says if I don't stand firm, she'll never feel secure." "And I say," I responded, my voice steady, "that security built on exclusion will always crack." He reached for my hand, tentative. I let him hold it, but I didn't squeeze back. "I need time," he said. I nodded. Time doesn't heal what truth avoids. He left shortly after. No hug, just a quiet goodbye that felt like another door closing softly. That night, I sat in my bedroom and made a list, something my therapist suggested at the senior center. Asterisk, what I can control, what I cannot. I cannot control my son's marriage. I cannot control Vanessa's fears. I cannot control how others rewrite my role. But I can control my boundaries, my peace, my dignity. The next morning, I declined an invitation to the baby shower I wasn't officially invited to anyway, sent by a cousin who felt sorry for me. I sent a gift instead, thoughtful, neutral, loving from afar. Because love doesn't always mean access. Sometimes it means restraint. As I sealed the box, I whispered a blessing for that unborn child, not conditional, not resentful, pure. And in that moment, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Because I was finally choosing myself without apology. I never thought I would feel loneliness so sharply in the middle of a crowded city. Even with neighbors chatting, kids playing outside, and church bells ringing, I felt the kind of emptiness that only comes when your own blood has turned a corner without you. It was a hollow ache, familiar yet unforgiving, and it clung to me in the evenings when the world went quiet. The days blurred into routine. Grocery trips, quiet lunches, crossword puzzles, and the occasional phone call from friends checking on me. But Marcus never called, not to talk about the baby, not to check on me, not even to apologize. Each passing week was a reminder that the son I raised had chosen distance, and sometimes even loyalty cannot be demanded by love. I started spending more time with the ladies at the senior center. They were my lifeline, women with stories as jagged as mine, stories of children who had left, spouses who had passed, betrayals that never healed completely. I'd listen, I'd nod, I'd share the smallest pieces of myself, but always cautiously. Some wounds are too raw for casual conversation. One Wednesday, we had our weekly knitting circle. The aroma of strong coffee mingled with yarn and soft laughter. I was halfway through a scarf for a friend's granddaughter when Mrs. Thompson leaned close, her eyes soft. "Lorraine, you've got that look," she said, tilting her head. "The one that says you're carrying someone else's storm." I put down my needles. "It's Marcus," I whispered, "and Vanessa, and the baby, and everything in between." She nodded knowingly. "Ah, child, sometimes our children don't make the choices we hope for. Doesn't mean they stop needing us, or that we stop needing ourselves." Her words stayed with me long after we left. That evening, I walked home slowly, letting the cool December air chase away some of the heaviness. My house, my quiet refuge, felt less suffocating that night. For the first time in months, I thought maybe I could be alone and not lonely. Still, the sting of betrayal lingered. I couldn't stop thinking about Marcus as a little boy, falling asleep on my shoulder, trusting me to protect him from everything. How had it all gone so wrong? How had love, the very thing I nurtured most, become the wedge that pushed us apart? A week later, I received a message from Marcus. It was brief. "Can we talk?" My heart skipped. My hands trembled, but I didn't rush. I let the message sit for a day, letting my pride and my intuition weigh the decision. Finally, I called back. We agreed to meet at a small cafe halfway between our houses. It was neutral territory, bright and bustling, the kind of place that felt safe but not too intimate. When I arrived, he was already there, eyes downcast, hands wrapped around a coffee cup. He looked smaller somehow, older, haggard, not the confident man who had pushed me away, but a son burdened with guilt and fear. "Mom," he said, voice tight, "thank you for coming." I nodded. "Marcus, I came because you asked. But understand this. I'm not coming to negotiate my love. I'm coming to listen." And listen I did. He told me about Vanessa's fears, about the pressures he felt to keep the peace, about sleepless nights, worrying about doing right by everyone except himself. And as he spoke, I realized he wasn't just afraid of me. He was afraid of who he'd become in trying to please someone else. When he finished, I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "Baby, no one can live your life but you, and no one should make you feel ashamed for honoring the people who love you." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I know, Mom. I'm sorry." I didn't answer right away. Words felt inadequate, but I squeezed his hand and said softly, "I know, baby. I know." For the first time in months, I felt the bridge between us begin to quiver, but not break. I never expected that a simple coffee shop conversation could feel like stepping into sunlight after years of being trapped in shadows. But that morning, as I sat across from Marcus, the warmth of possibility seeped slowly into my bones. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself breathe without guilt. He talked quietly at first, hesitant, like he feared my reaction. But the longer we spoke, the more the weight on his shoulders became visible. I remembered the little boy who once needed me to carry him across puddles after rainstorms, and I realized that even grown, he still needed guidance, not control. "I've been so tangled, Mom," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to honor Vanessa, to honor the baby, to honor everything. And in the process, I ignored you. I ignored us." I nodded, letting him speak. He had to untangle his own heart before I could help him find balance. I don't even know where to start fixing things, he admitted. His eyes met mine then, full of shame and longing. I feel like I've lost my own mother in the process. Marcus, I said, taking both his hands in mine, love isn't about losing anyone, but it's about truth, and it's never too late to speak it. He swallowed hard. Mom, I want you in the baby's life, but Vanessa, she's afraid. She thinks it's too soon, too much, too messy. I squeezed his hands gently. Honey, the only thing messy is pretending everything is fine when it's not. You can't let fear dictate who belongs in your life. You have to choose integrity. He nodded slowly, absorbing the words like they were a balm he hadn't realized he needed. I don't know if Vanessa will ever forgive me for wanting you involved. That's not for you to worry about, I said softly. Your responsibility is to love rightly. Let her handle her own fears. A silence fell between us then, not uncomfortable but reflective. The hum of the cafe faded as if the world had shrunk to the small table we shared. For the first time in months, I felt hope, not naive hope, but the kind that trembles and waits, knowing the road ahead will be difficult but not impossible. I want to be a better son, Mom, he said finally. For you, for the baby, for myself. You can start today, I replied, my voice warm but firm. Small steps, honesty, presence, and above all, respect for those you love and for yourself. He nodded again, tears glistening. I will try, I promise. As we stood to leave, he hugged me tightly. It wasn't the kind of hug that solves everything, but it was the kind that opens doors. The kind that says, I'm here and I want to do better. Walking home that afternoon, the sky was clear and sunlight danced across the streets. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of betrayal alone. I felt connected, not just to my son, but to the life I had fought so hard to protect, to the lessons I had lived, and to the love that refused to disappear even when it was tested most. That evening, I sat by the window, a cup of tea warming my hands, reflecting on the fragile threads of family. Sometimes, I realized, loyalty isn't about blood alone. It's about truth, courage, and the willingness to face the storms together, even when the waves feel impossible to navigate. And in that quiet moment, I allowed myself a smile, a real one, because no matter how messy, complicated, or painful family could be, there was still room for hope. The days that followed that coffee shop meeting were strange. They weren't traumatic. They weren't filled with sudden revelations or grand gestures. But they carried a kind of subtle magic, the quiet work of rebuilding what had been broken. Marcus started calling more regularly, not just about logistics or bank statements, but about small things. Mom, I saw a bird in the yard today that reminded me of you, he said one morning. Or, I tried your sweet potato pie recipe, and I almost burned the kitchen down. His voice carried laughter now, and it warmed me in a way I had almost forgotten. But Vanessa remained a shadow, present yet distant. She sent brief messages and made polite appearances when necessary, but I could tell the tension lingered, like a faint scent of storm clouds. I didn't let it unsettle me. I had learned that the only heart I could truly control was my own. One Saturday, I invited a few of my closest friends over for a small brunch. As I laid the table, I thought about how far I had come, from feeling pushed aside, invisible and powerless, to taking the reins of my life in quiet, deliberate ways. The flowers were fresh, the food smelled comforting, and the sun streamed through the windows. It was my little victory, my affirmation that my space, my time, and my peace mattered. The phone rang while I was arranging the coffee cups. Marcus. Mom, can I come by? He asked, hesitant. Of course, baby, I replied, smiling. When he arrived, he carried nothing but himself and a nervous energy I immediately recognized. He sat at the kitchen table and hesitated. I wanted to ask something. he said finally, "about the baby. Vanessa and we're trying to figure out how to involve you without causing stress." I felt my heart catch. "Marcus, stress isn't caused by love, it's caused by fear and avoidance." He nodded slowly. "I know, and I want you there. But I need you to understand, we're still figuring things out. I don't want to fight her over this. I just want her to see that your presence is a blessing, not a threat." I reached out and took his hand. "Honey, love that's real never threatens. Love that matters builds bridges, not walls." He looked at me then, eyes glossy with emotion. "I've been so scared, Mom. I didn't know how to balance everything. I didn't know how to protect you and her at the same time." "You protect them by being honest, Marcus," I said, "by standing firm in truth and kindness." He took a deep breath. "I think I'm ready to try that. I want the baby to know you, to know her grandmother." Tears pricked at my eyes, and I swallowed them back. "Then let's take this one step at a time, together." For the first time, I saw a glimmer of the family I had imagined, the one that could survive betrayal, distance, and fear, not perfectly, but with heart intact. That evening, after Marcus left, I stood by the window looking out at the darkened streets. The world felt quieter, kinder. I realized that the hardest battles weren't the ones fought with anger or words, but the battles fought inside your own heart, choosing patience, love, and grace, even when it's undeserved. And in that quiet, I whispered a promise to myself. No matter what happened next, I would remain steadfast, loving, and present, not as a pawn, not as a shadow, but as the matriarch who refused to vanish quietly. I woke that morning with a strange kind of hope settling into my chest, the kind that feels fragile but real. It was the first time in months I didn't wake with a knot of anxiety twisting my stomach. And yet, I knew that rebuilding a family doesn't happen in a single day. It happens in pieces, slow and deliberate, with courage and patience as your only guides. The day began quietly, with the hum of the neighborhood stirring outside my window. I brewed coffee and wrapped myself in a shawl, looking at the winter sunlight spilling across the floor. I thought of Marcus, Vanessa, and the baby, and I prayed for their hearts, for mine, and for the spaces that needed healing. The call came mid-morning. Marcus's voice, hesitant yet steady. "Mom, can I stop by later?" "Of course, baby," I said softly. When he arrived, Vanessa was with him. My chest tightened for a moment, but I reminded myself that Grace doesn't always feel comfortable. I greeted her politely, as one does when extending peace, and we moved to the kitchen table. Marcus poured tea for all of us, a small gesture that felt like a bridge being built, plank by plank. "I wanted to apologize," Vanessa said, her voice measured, "for how things have been between us." I nodded, accepting the words without comment. They were genuine, even if tentative. Marcus leaned forward, glancing between us. "Mom, Vanessa and I want you to be involved. We don't want the baby to grow up without her grandmother, but we need to do this carefully, without conflict. I hope you understand." I smiled gently, reaching across the table for his hand. "Honey, I understand, and I appreciate the honesty. That's the first step to healing. Now let's focus on what matters. Love, presence, and being truthful with each other." Vanessa's gaze softened. "I've realized that excluding you, it wasn't fair. I thought I was protecting Marcus and myself, but I see now I was wrong. You have a right to be part of this family." I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me I hadn't felt in months. "Thank you for saying that. The baby will need both of you to be whole, and I can help, not replace, not control, just be present." The conversation turned to practicalities, how we'd navigate holidays, visits, and eventual milestones. We spoke candidly, setting boundaries and understanding expectations. For the first time in a long time, I felt heard, respected, and valued. When they left, Marcus hugged me, holding on longer than he had in months. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I love you too, baby," I replied. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, the cool air brushing my face. I thought of the past, the nights of silence, the heartbreak, the fear that I'd lost my son forever, and I realized something important. Even when family falters, even when blood seems to fail, love can still find its way back if you refuse to give up on it. I picked up my journal and wrote down the lessons I had learned. Courage isn't loud, loyalty isn't blind, and love doesn't demand obedience. It demands honesty, patience, and grace. As I closed the journal, I felt a quiet strength settle in me, deep and unwavering. I wasn't naive. I knew challenges lay ahead. I knew missteps would come. But I also knew that no one could erase the love that had been built over decades, not even fear or betrayal. For the first time, I truly believed that the family I had always hoped for, messy, complicated, but whole, was possible. The months that followed were slow, but steady. Every phone call, every visit, every small acknowledgement from Marcus or even Vanessa became a brick in the bridge we were rebuilding. And I learned that reconciliation doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It whispers. It tiptoes. It shows up quietly, asking only to be noticed. One afternoon, I found myself holding a tiny pair of baby shoes. They were soft pastel blue and smelled faintly of new fabric. I cradled them in my hands as if they carried the entire world. Soon, I realized they did. They carried hope, connection, and the chance to weave myself back into a life that had once felt painfully distant. Marcus called that evening. "Mom," he said, excitement and nervousness tangled in his voice. "Vanessa and we'd like you to come with us to the ultrasound." I blinked back tears. Yes, baby, I'd be honored. That Saturday, I sat in the dimly lit room, hands clasped over my heart, watching the screen as tiny shapes moved, fluttered, and grew. The doctor's voice narrated the heartbeat, steady and strong, and there it was, a small, miraculous life that carried pieces of both Marcus and Vanessa, and, whether anyone realized it yet, a piece of me too. Marcus reached across the chair, squeezing my hand. "Thank you for being here," he whispered. I smiled, the warmth spreading through me like sunlight. "Always, baby." When Vanessa looked at me, there was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I think I underestimated you," she said quietly. "I thought your involvement would be intrusive, but I see now it's necessary and appreciated." I nodded. "I'm here to support, not compete, to love, not control. That's all anyone can ask for." As we left the clinic, I noticed something remarkable. I felt included, not just tolerated, not as a concession, but as a part of this unfolding story. It was a fragile sense of belonging, but one I knew was built on honesty, patience, and mutual respect. Over the next few weeks, I spent more time with Vanessa than I ever thought I would. We baked together, laughed quietly over shared kitchen disasters, and even argued at times, but it was real, honest interaction. And slowly, that tension I had felt for so long began to dissolve, replaced by mutual understanding. Marcus, too, seemed lighter. His guilt no longer weighed him down like a stone. He was present, genuinely present, in our conversations, our small outings, and the planning of the baby's arrival. And I realized something. Children grow, yes, but parents do too. We evolve together, even through betrayal, mistakes, and misunderstandings. One evening, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in my living room holding a cup of tea, reflecting on the path that had brought us here. The tears I shed weren't from pain. They were from the beauty of survival, of endurance, of love that refuses to be extinguished, even when tested by distance, fear, and betrayal. I whispered a prayer, thanking God for guidance, for patience, and for the grace to hold my heart open when it would have been easier to close it. I knew there would be challenges ahead. Parenting is rarely simple, and family life is rarely perfect. But I also knew this. No matter the obstacles, love built on truth and respect could never be erased. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope. Not naive hope, but the kind that grows quietly and steadily, rooted in experience and tempered by trials. The day my grandson was born, I sat in the hospital room with my hands trembling, not from age, not from nerves, but from a lifetime of longing and love finally converging in that tiny, wailing miracle. He was perfect, soft, fragile, and miraculous, with a tuft of dark hair and tiny fingers that wrapped instinctively around mine. And in that moment, I understood something I had always known but had to fight through betrayal and fear to truly feel. Family isn't defined by perfection. It's defined by love, persistence, and the courage to stay connected even when the road is rocky. Marcus stood beside me, awe and reverence in his eyes. "Mom, he's amazing," he whispered. "Yes, baby," I replied softly, tears streaming down my cheeks. "And so are you. Both of you." Vanessa looked exhausted but radiant. She caught my gaze and smiled, a genuine open smile that seemed to say, "We've found a place for you here." Holding that baby, I felt the weight of the past lift slightly. The weeks of distance, the nights of worry, the letters, the confrontations, they had all been necessary. They had forged clarity, boundaries, and understanding that no easy peace could have provided. As the evening sun slanted through the hospital blinds, I whispered prayers over that small life. I prayed for love, protection, and a family that could grow together without resentment or fear. I prayed for Marcus, that he would find the strength to stand in truth and balance, honoring both his wife and his mother. And I prayed for myself, that I would continue to love boldly, even when it required patience, restraint, and courage. After leaving the hospital, I spent hours rocking my grandson in my arms at home. The little boy cooed, eyes wide and innocent, unaware of the family storms that had raged before his arrival. And in his small, perfect presence, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Hope that love could endure, that blood could still bind, not in obligation, but in choice and mutual respect. Later that evening, Marcus came by to help settle the baby into his nursery. We spoke quietly, laughing softly over minor mishaps, drooled on blankets, misplaced diapers, and sleepless nights ahead. It was ordinary, messy, human, and beautiful. "Mom," Marcus said finally, his voice earnest, "I know I didn't always make the right choices, but I want you to know, I see you, I need you, and I'm trying to be the son you raised me to be." I reached out, placing my hand over his. "Baby, you always were, and now we'll keep building together, step by step, day by day." That night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Betrayal had tested me. Loneliness had haunted me. Fear and pride had tried to close my heart, but through it all, I had learned that love is never about control. It's about presence, courage, and honesty. And sometimes, it takes losing your place to realize how strong your roots truly are. I thought of my mother's words, repeated all those years ago. "The world might turn its back on you, but your blood never will." I had doubted them. I had questioned them. I had wept over them. But now I understood fully. Blood may not guarantee loyalty, but it does create opportunities for love to be chosen, again and again. As I watched Marcus cradle his son, I felt a quiet, profound peace settle in my soul. Family isn't perfect. It's messy, emotional, and tested by time. But it is worth every tear, every confrontation, every hard-earned lesson. And in that moment, I knew. I would continue to love boldly, forgive carefully, and cherish every heartbeat of the family I had fought so hard to keep. Not because it owed me anything, but because love, real love, is always worth the struggle.